We'll get to Keon Coleman here in your article in just a minute. One more for me, Marcus, on Dallas is maybe an obvious question, but Micah Parsons, how do you think that ends?
He's going to get a contract. I've got no doubt about it. It's just, does it come in June or does it come mid-August? The Cowboys want Micah Parsons to be there. Micah Parsons wants to be a Dallas Cowboy, and the Cowboys have an offer on the table right now, which would make him the highest paid defensive player in NFL history. They're close, not close enough to say that the deal's done. But, yeah, you don't have to worry. Micah Parsons is going to be in Dallas for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
How about the rest of the defense? Diggs, is that expected to be back on track? I mean, injuries really undid them on that side of the ball last year.
And that's one of the biggest reasons why it's harder to project this Cowboys team moving forward, because Trayvon Diggs, their all-pro cornerback, is coming off yet another knee injury. Some of the whispers have been maybe we won't see him for the first 2 months of the season, and that's putting a lot of stress on someone like Kyrie Elam to now be a starter. DeMarvion Overshown, their top linebacker, he tore multiple knee ligaments late in the season. He's likely not going to be back until Thanksgiving at the earliest. So they just have a lot of guys that are at key spots that they're relying on to get healthy. We could see them without multiple key starters for the first 2-3 months of the year.
Yeah, and another depth piece at corner there was a guy that we talked a lot about here for the Bills coming off an injury from East Carolina, right? Siobhan Revell Jr.
Yeah, and the Cowboys are hopeful that he will be ready for Week 1. But still, you're talking about a third-round rookie who's not played a lot of snaps in college football, coming off a torn ACL to start against A.J. Brown on the outside. That could be rough. And I think that's what's so hard about this team is they clearly have talent, but when will all that talent be healthy on the field together? We might not see it at all this season.
Well, at least you get Malik Neighbors in Week 2. Marcus, if the schedule leaks are correct. Maybe a little bit tougher for him to get the ball, but still.
It's going to be a rough start to the season for Dallas.
Do you have an Elam take? You say you're down the road in Erie. I don't know how closely you might have followed his career here. Sal Capaccio with us would often say, because there was always a spotlight on Elam, it wasn't working. And he would talk about, like, he was thought to be a really hard worker and that it wasn't, there's nothing diva about it, nothing sort of easily explained for his struggles. But, man, I mean, he couldn't really get on the field, and then in the playoffs they needed him in that Chief game, and it did not go well.
Yeah, he's had a very up-and-down career, to say the least. Now, the Cowboys are hopeful in Matt Eberflus's defense that he's going to be a better fit. But I don't know anything that we've seen, through the first 3 years of his career suggests that he's suddenly going to turn around. But then again, you don't find cornerbacks on day 3 of the draft that have his type of talent. So he's a young kid. He hasn't played a ton relative to, other first-round picks. The Cowboys are hoping that their coaching staff can figure it out.
All right, Marcus, let's talk Keon Coleman. You wrote a piece for BuffaloDown.com. I got to make sure I say it right, BuffaloDown.com. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, big words here. Like, one of the most important players in the league this year, Coleman. What have you seen? And let's hear the argument for why so much here rides on him.
Well, let's talk about the positives, right? If this thing works out and he becomes the X-receiver that they drafted and they wanted him to develop to be, I don't know how you stop this Buffalo offense, right? Because now you've got somebody on the outside that can get open, that can win the contested catch balls, who can make plays in the end zone. That's what we saw at Florida State. We saw somebody who could eventually be that player. Now, he's so young and so raw that it was, up and down as a rookie. Now, the wrist injury obviously didn't help, but you're hoping that he can be that big body X receiver. And now you've got Khalil Shakir coming out of the slot, Josh Palmer, who can play inside outside. If he turns out to be that number one receiver that Buffalo thought they were getting when they drafted him last year, this should be the best offense in the NFL. And if you have one more piece, going up against Kansas City or going up against Baltimore, maybe that's the difference in getting you over the hump.
Yeah, I mean, the focus on the receivers here, I mean, there's been a lot of hoopla here. I don't know how closely you followed it, Marcus, but some of it generated by the station itself and Brandon Beane sort of going off like he did on the Monday following the draft. I feel like, in a way, what he's done by being as aggressive as he's been about defending the guys he's already got here is really put a spotlight on on Coleman for sure, and I think also Dalton Kincaid, a first-round player, pass catcher from the year before. So to me, like, he's turned the heat up not only on himself but on those two guys and Coleman and Kincaid.
Yeah, if it doesn't work out, this is why I'm calling him one of the most important players. If things don't work out for Coleman, then this offense, it's still going to be very good. Make no mistake about that. But they're not quite as scary. Even someone like Mac Hollins, who was on the roster last year, made some pretty big plays last season, especially in the playoffs. He's obviously gone, left in free agency. There's just not a lot of options who can play on the outside on this roster right now, because even someone like Elijah Moore, who they signed after the draft, he's more of a slot player. Josh Palmer's best play comes out of the slot. I don't know who's going to fill that role, and maybe that's where you have to look at a trade midseason, but Coleman is really the only player on this roster that profiles as an outside X receiver. And again, if he hits, I think he can take this offense to another level.
You're in the fantasy space too, Locked On Dynasty. Mm-hmm. And one thing Coleman could do for all of us, make it easier by really standing out, taking that step. Because, I'm a fantasy content producer as well. And I'm on shows last year, and they know I'm in Buffalo, and they always wanted to know, like, who's going to be the guy? And I stumbled over that question, Marcus, every time. Like, there was no easy answer to that. Shakir, he might have the same season every year of his career. And in terms of points, there's not a lot, but it's good. It has NFL real-life value. So Coleman could make our lives easier in that front, so I don't have to go like I did last year, going on podcasts touting Marquez Valdez-Scantling, for example.
Yeah, we think Khalil Shakir is basically going to be a flex play for the rest of his life. Now, maybe we're wrong. Maybe he ends up becoming that number one receiver. Clearly, Buffalo thinks he has another level he can get to, and that's why they gave him a contract extension this offseason. But, yeah, it's been very much matchup dependent. Some weeks it's Keon Coleman. Some weeks it was Amari Cooper. Well, not really, but a couple of weeks it was Amari Cooper. It would be nice if there was one bona fide outside receiver that we can say, hey, this guy is locked into 7-8 targets every single week. Coleman obviously has the best opportunity to do that. He's the highest drafted receiver on the team. He's the biggest receiver on the team. Again, he is so incredibly young. And it wasn't like he was unproductive as a rookie.
Right.
He had a pretty decent season. It's just when you were comparing it to someone like, I don't know, Xavier Worthy, who the Bills traded out of, and you saw what Xavier Worthy was doing in some of these games, it made the comparison look a little worse than maybe it was. But, again, we're going into year two. This is where when receivers generally break out. It's a big-time opportunity for Keon Coleman and the Buffalo Bills.
There's also McConkey, although there's some overlap with him and Shakir. And there's even Brian Thomas, Marcus. Like, that would have been a trade up, but the Bills have done that sort of thing. Easy to say in hindsight. Our Sneaky Joe had a stat, and I'm probably going to be a little bit wrong here, hopefully only a little bit, about the Bills last season. That it was something like 10 or 11 different players led them in receiving yards in a game, and none of them was Kincaid.
It's ridiculous. And Kincaid, honestly, is probably the most talented of all the receivers and tight ends on the roster.
Even one of them was Tyrell Shavers on a long
with one catch and 69
run,
yards
garbage
against
time
the Jets. Right.
Against the Jets. Thinking about your dynasty mind as well here, Marcus, what are you doing with Kincaid?
Yeah, this one's really tough because I was a huge fan of Dalton Kincaid coming out of Utah. But, this is somebody who, even going back to his days at Utah, struggled to stay healthy and struggled to stay on the field. And I don't think it's a toughness issue or anything like that, but it's just a lot of nagging injuries. And it seems like whenever he's not 100% healthy, it really impacts his play on the field. I think Buffalo would love to feature him more on the offense, but if you can't stay on the field and you can't be 100% healthy, it's hard to do that. He was somebody who we were ranking as a top 7, top 8 dynasty tight end, and I just don't know how we get there right now after what we've seen from the first 2 seasons of his career.
Well, he's easy to trade for right now, I would say. Yeah. Like it's a pretty soft market right. on Kincaid. I look forward to chatting with you again and maybe even meeting. I've met Kate, your Locked On Dynasty co-host, at the Fantasy Expo, and that's definitely an area of interest of mine. So I'll start listening.
Yeah, Fantasy Expo is out in Canton, Ohio. It's a lot of fun every single year. I hope we see some listeners there.
Have you been there a number of times? I've been 3.
I've been there all 3 times. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, let's hang this year in Canton. Thank you, Marcus.
Of course, anytime.
All right. Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys, his Keon Coleman article, one more time, buffalowdown.com.
I can't believe we just went 20 minutes without talking about the schedule. I'm in a panic.
I would have mentioned that